Welcome back to Dawn of Man, everyone. I'm Siege Plays. We are going to dive back into this episode because, unfortunately, it seems that my microphone was off for the next 3 episodes, so I'm really, really proud of that mistake. So what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to have to try and talk through the approximation of what we went through for these 3 episodes. So I apologize that it's going to be just me talking and watching the screen as we go. But that is just what we're going to have to do, unfortunately. So we just dove into the age of metal here, and we need to get going on our copper mines because we need to start making metal tools. So we're still working on our walls. We want to be careful. We don't want to increase our workload too much. But it is about time that we get at least one mine going, and so we're probably going to set up, you'll see in a minute, we'll set up a production area kind of in our town here, but we want to get this mine going at least because it's super, super close to us. And then we will need to build the charcoal pits and the furnaces and all that stuff. I think we're going to build them right over this area here because it's kind of the perfect spot for it. Yeah, we still definitely need to finish up these walls. I was thinking we could put maybe a production area over there as well, but we really don't need more than one right now. So here's where I kind of take a look to see where the copper mines are in the area, which we have a decent amount of them. We have a couple close by over here, and then there will be a couple on the other side of the river, which copper mines are pretty abundant. But I think one of the things that I mentioned when we were going through this was that you're only using copper for a fairly brief period of time within the span of the game because you move pretty quickly on to bronze, and then from bronze pretty quickly into iron. So you'll only be using copper for a little while, but the bars and the ore do make a really fantastic source of revenue as far as trade goes, because they're going to be worth a decent amount. The only problem is you don't want to make too many of them while you're using iron as well, because that will eat up some of your workload here in the game. So here's where I started laying out our production area. I don't like that it's kind of away from where the mines are going to be, but this game doesn't seem to mind that very much. So I definitely like to lay out 2 charcoal pits because for some reason charcoal production is not usually as fast as I would like it to be. I think we laid out 2 furnaces, and then we only put down one metalsmith at this point in time because I don't think we needed to. But you can see this area right here is a kind of perfect area for it. It fits everything perfectly. And then I wanted to put some stockpiles for the ores and the logs that will be used to make charcoal as well, just so that the supplies are kind of close to where we're using them. Yes, we put down 2 rock stockpiles and 1 for wood. And then that kind of just completes this little area, and it leaves us enough room for defenses along that wall there. But I think we'll probably end up deleting part of that wall in the near future. So it looks like here's where I was checking out, trying to adjust the imbalance between the clothing that we had here, because we have plenty of warm clothing, but not very much for the summer. We had plenty of linen. Linen was coming in pretty well, so we wanted to mark this as high priority, I think, in order to get the production kind of sparked a little bit there, because we needed to catch up on linen clothing for the summer. I still want to know why this wall took so long to build, because it takes at least another episode. But I guess with a workload at, 179%, that's kind of going to be the case. Yeah, so it looks like I was checking out some of the other copper mines. Maybe wanted to get some of these trees out of the way here. Logs have been a consistent source of need in this game so far. I think one thing I'm noticing now while looking back at the recordings of this while I'm not actually playing it is how spastic my mouse movements are. I'll try to adjust that in the future for you guys so that I'm not, twitching the mouse all over the screen. So there we go. Our first copper mine is up and going. They are kind of limited on how much they can provide. I think each mine is only about 65. Oh yeah, here's where I was kind of going through what my plan was for what the next moves were. And I think the thought here was that we were going to go with donkey domestication and then carts first, because the carts would be more useful, especially for wood and whatnot. And the trees are nice, but they just add to the workload. So we'll see. I can't remember where I decided to go next from here. Yeah, I was talking through the use of technology there. So yeah, the mines, for now anyway, they only provide about 65 ore per. So you'll see throughout this that I often buy copper from the trader because I don't want my mines to run out, which is funny because there was, a whole bunch of mines. But the problem is when they do run out, you have to go further and further. And then we start having problems with hypothermia when our population grows. Yeah, here's where I was adjusting the limits on stuff that I knew we were going to need. Let's put the charcoal up because I think people can use it as fuel too. So you want to make sure that you have plenty of it because you're going to use it. And here's where I noticed that our supply of logs was only set to a limit of 10, which was kind of ridiculous. It means that we were, going to be running low the entire time because they were only set to get 10. Which, it also increases our workload, but later on we'll get a higher population. We'll get a little bit better about managing that. I do appreciate that the workers decided to do the charcoal pits first, though, especially because that's what we're going to need first. You can see our people are clearly having no trouble harvesting what we have in the field right now, which is a good sign. We're producing more than enough straw at this point. I will say I always hate how they just leave the stuff in the fields, though. I played a game a while back where this was back when I still didn't really know what I was doing with this game, but they would just leave the entire harvest on the field. Like I had haystacks and everything, but they would just leave the entire harvest on the field until the next spring. It was kind of crazy. The nice thing is, though, the children in this game, they won't do like actual tasks, but they'll do things like, picking up sticks or picking up the straw or the grain that's left on the ground. Oh, here's where I was buying copper ore from the trader. Which, especially because we were producing a bunch of linen and wool, which are also excellent trade resources, by the way, and don't take anywhere near as much workload to produce. They're great for trading for ores. And when you do stuff like that, they're going to be harvesting the linen and the wool regardless. I mean, you can set the limits on that, but I generally don't because I use it as a trade resource. But if you trade for ores, that means that they won't have to go to the mines and they can do stuff that's close by. If you see the sheep with the little wool signs above it, it's, in their town as opposed to having to climb through the mountains to go get it. Also not a bad idea to trade resources that you don't need so that they don't just rot in your inventory. Yeah, so we have our first official source of copper ore here, our first official couple copper ores here. We'll start producing once we get one of our furnaces just got built. And our metalsmith is done. So now we have the full chain of production up. We can start creating copper tools. Oh, here's where I was talking about the amount of ore in each mine, because when you get to specifically the Iron Age, you can actually unlock deep mining, which only works for iron mines, but it increases the amount of iron, I think, to like, if I remember correctly, like 300 something, which is really, really useful. Because you'll be using iron for armor, for reinforced walls, for tools. You'll be using it for a lot of stuff, so it's useful to have deeper mines for that. Oh, talking about the animals that go extinct. Yeah, when you move up in the ages here, the animals will go extinct over time, which is a shame because they're a good source of points. You just tend to forget about that being a thing. Like you can get technology points for hunting the woolly mammoths and the rhinos and whatnot, but once they go extinct, that's your chance. It's gone. So here I was adjusting the resources that were allowed to be stored in each pile because we don't want things that we're not going to use there. So those are, specifically to shorten the chain of having to go and pick up the resources. So we went ahead and marked the stick pile as logs only and the 2 rock piles as ores only and charcoal. And then here's where we were looking through, because right now it doesn't really necessarily make sense to be producing, to add to the workload to produce copper, like to go through the copper ore. It doesn't really make sense to be using the copper ore, which is a more rare resource right now, when some of our other tools made out of flint and bone will also have the same statistics. So here I was marking, the axes are better, and I believe that the pickaxes are better. And then other than that, we're going to continue making our tools out of bone and flint instead, because those are resources we already have a lot of. And that way we can balance what we're using for our tools so that we're not running through our copper ore like crazy. Now, this won't stay that way for long because pretty soon we'll want to get rid of those crafters. They won't really be of any use anymore. They're just taking up space, and we can replace them with like workshops and whatnot. But for now, we're going to keep them making our bone and flint tools. I think one of the things I talked about here was that some of the copper tools have the same statistics as the bone and flint tools, and some of the bronze tools have the same, or the bronze tools are mostly better. And then when you unlock the Iron Age, you'll notice that the Iron Age tools and the Bronze Age tools are essentially the same statistics. So you'll want to balance those as well as you work your way into the iron and then the steel, the use of steel. That way you can kind of continue using your copper and tin resources that your people will still be mining. Although I guess if you just switched to iron instead, then they would pretty much stop mining those because you'd run into your limits. So it depends. If you keep mining them, you can use those bars as, sources of income. I think here we were talking about possibly extending our wall out to the little shallow patch in the river there, because that will allow our defenses to be a little bit stronger than what we have currently, and maybe give us some more room for building some like water wheels and whatnot in the future. Here we can see people working on the walls finally, which has been, we've been building that wall for episodes now, so getting that done is kind of a priority. Especially because I didn't want to expand the city without finishing the walls there. But as you can tell, we are quickly running out of space in this little town here. I just wanted to get those walls up to defend what we have. I think we were talking about doing some orchards in these areas, since you can't really do much other farming there and you can't really do much building in those areas. So rocky and hilly areas are decent to put some trees in, just because you're not going to be making use of that space otherwise, except for maybe for harvesting trees. All right, so we're ready to unlock our next tech. Let's see which one I took. Pretty sure it was donkeys, but I could be wrong. Nope, okay, I went with the trees instead. Got it. I think I wanted to make sure, I don't really know what my thought process was there. I think I should have taken donkeys, but I guess the only reason to get the donkeys was for the carts, so no, that thought process still doesn't make any sense. I'm trying to, defend my logic here, and there's not really any to defend. I mean, we did need to balance some of our food a little bit, and having more quick use food, I guess. I don't really know what to call it, but things like fruits and legumes and whatnot are good to have, because they'll mean that your meat and fish stores will kind of stock up a little bit, because people will go for the foods that decay faster. So they'll go for, cherries and pears and nuts and bread and cheese and all that stuff before they go for the meat, which is good because the meat lasts a lot longer, and so that helps your food stores. Now, one thing you won't see me plant a lot of is chestnuts, and that's because chestnuts are the only nuts that you can plant and they are harvested in the fall at the same time as all of your other crops. And it's really hard to balance having those and all of the other crops that we have that are harvested in the fall. So I don't generally plant them a whole lot, even though having nuts is good for a source of balance. This game doesn't focus so much on balance of resources as games like Banished might, you know. So now we'll have some vegetables and some fruits coming in, and that'll help our food stores because we want to make sure that our food stores are good before we start expanding our population to increase the workforce. And here's where I started laying out kind of what this little area of our town will look like, because I wanted this to mostly be for storage of food and for animals. But now that the trees are out of the way, we can clearly see, you know, where we can lay out houses and stables and whatnot. Especially because you want to have at least, you know, for the beginning, you want to have at least one stable for each group of animals because they only hold space for 10 animals, and you want to have a little extra storage space in case they, you know, reproduce during the winter, which they often will do. Trading for more copper ore here. I think we're talking about the layout of the town coming up in the future. Yeah, because here we talk about extending our walls a little bit. Since we have this whole area off to the right side where we can do farming, it makes sense to be able to extend our walls that direction. Here I was showing off the tiny little trees growing. I love the way that the trees grow in this game because it's just, you can see them when they're really tiny and then they just grow from there. They don't grow in like, you know, segments. They just continue to grow slowly, which is kind of cool. I really do love this game. I think it's well done. I love the way that it looks. Now I want to know, reflecting on this now that I'm watching it and doing the voiceover afterwards, I really want to know why I looked and saw that the workshops were available and then just didn't build one. Although I may be addressing that now. I know I wanted to get these rocks out of the way, which takes a little while as well, especially since we're not using stone for anything, so we're not, you know, running below our limit. There we go. Okay, so I did address that fact. Because I think we were looking at our sledges and seeing that our sledges were running out and that we didn't have a production source of them. I kept having to lay them out, and the workshop will just automatically produce them. So we wanted to get at least one of those going. We'll get multiple other ones later because those will make carts and bows and all sorts of stuff. Better fishing tools. Here's where I started thinking about phasing out some of these crafters here so we could put in another workshop maybe. Because we are a little bit limited on space so far. Yeah, so you can see these only hold 65 ore, and that does run out pretty quick when you're using them to produce, especially once we start having to, you know, replace all of our bone and flint with metal. You'll go through it pretty fast. I think I was considering planting an orchard here or extending our wall. Yeah, it doesn't make sense to do that though, because if you look, you're not really going to be able to build many buildings in that area, so planting trees there makes a lot more sense. And eventually that field that's in the town will probably go so we can put some buildings there because we have plenty of room for fields outside of the town. But it is nice to have that little source of straw inside the town to feed the animals that we have on that side. Because if it takes your people too long to get from the hay bales over to the or the haystacks over to the animals, they'll starve in the stables, which is a really obnoxious thing that happens sometimes. You can have, 200 straw and animals will still starve because your people don't get it to them fast enough. I really do like the way that one megalith looks, just looking out over the river and out over the lower town, I guess you can call it. Cheesemakers, we were talking about making sure we had enough of those to use the milk that we had. Now those are both resources that decay very, very quickly, as in real life. The milk decays, I think it only has like 1 season, and the cheese, I think, has like maybe 3. So they decay both within the year. Here we were looking at where to lay our stone circle. It's kind of tough because it needs a pretty wide radius. Not as wide as the cairn, but trying to figure out a place that like makes sense. Thinking about the history of stone circles, they generally weren't in the middle of a town. They would be out, somewhere kind of sacred, but you also want them because your citizens use them as a source of morale. You want them to be close enough to your town that they'll be able to use it. Here we were placing more tree gathering areas because we were still having log supply issues, and we're going to have to get rid of all of these trees in the future anyway because we're going to use all of that space for farming. So it doesn't hurt to have a couple extra tree gathering areas. And also, if you have too many people gathering in one area, they'll just deplete the trees completely, so why not kind of spread that out a little bit? I think there I was talking about how I like to leave some trees in the town just because I like the look of it, but sometimes you need to chop them down. They'll grow back though, so. I hope you guys can hear that bird that's outside my window right now. I know that it's kind of silent because none of the audio recorded. I only noticed after I had everything set up. I was ready to go, excited to record for you guys because I love that this series seems to be actually doing pretty well on my channel. And I just, recorded the first episode and moved on to the second and third. And then as soon as I was done with it, I noticed that my audio bars in OBS were not moving at all and did not indicate that they had moved. And so I looked at the input, and for some reason, since the last time I recorded, it just decided that it was disabled. It decided that my audio had just been disabled, and so I had no sound at all, no desktop sound, no microphone. So I was really disappointed, and especially because this series has been doing well, I wanted to make it good for you guys. And yeah, now I'm stuck doing voiceovers for 3 episodes. It could have been worse, but also could have not happened at all. So now I've learned my lesson, and I'll pay attention and make sure that my microphones are recording before I start, doing multiple episodes, because I usually do multiple episodes at a time. Since I don't do this full time, I do have other things. I have a day job and I'm studying to do other things as well. So I try and record a couple at a time. That way I can try and give you guys consistent material. So if you're noticing a gap right now, it's mostly because I had a couple of recorded episodes planned for you guys, and then work got busy, and then I noticed that I hadn't recorded anything, and things kind of collapsed for a second there, but I'm trying to get that back on track for you all. We'll have more episodes of The Planet Crafter coming soon as well. Think about here is where I started looking at maybe building other copper mines, but I don't think I did that quite yet. Focusing on why certain buildings aren't getting built, aka the workshop. I increased the tannin limit because I know that we're going to need it for a bunch of other stuff, and it doesn't seem like our town is really producing a lot of it. Which is funny because it's usually the opposite. It's usually that I have problems, especially early game, maintaining dry skins rather than leather, but now we're having problems maintaining leather, so trying to address that. Eventually we'll get rid of those crops that are being harvested within the town there. I don't like getting rid of the berries, but, gotta put buildings in at some point. Just watching our little guy go into the blacksmith there. I don't really know what I was looking for there, but oh well. Fun to, change the view of the town from time to time. Getting rid of this stone. And once we start building the stone walls, that'll be really important. But for now, in the early game, they just kind of get in the way. Apologies if you can hear my roommates in the kitchen right now. So here's about where I started thinking about chopping down the trees in the town just because we needed the logs so badly that we just needed an easy source of them. Sometimes you have to specifically mark them for people to want to chop them down, so we did. At this point, I was getting desperate to finish the wall around the town, the defenses, because I know that raider attacks are going to start picking up pretty soon. Speaking of attacks, those will not happen as often the further into the game you go. The cave lions and the hyenas and whatnot will actually go extinct, and you won't have to worry about them attacking your town as much. Early game, they're a pain. They are such a nuisance, though, for that very reason, because they'll kill your villagers like that, or they'll give them infections, and it's difficult to maintain. I had a game where I was a good decade or so into the game, and I had to quit because the cave lions and the hyenas knocked my population down so far that I couldn't do anything. And they just kept, I couldn't get my population to grow in that game. Oh yeah, here's where I gathered some townies to come and help with this because this one guy looked like he was about to die. Well, that took care of that. All right, our workshop is finally got the logs that it needed. It's being built now. We're gonna go ahead and take a look at what tools we have available, what they'll be creating. I should have created that a long time ago, though. We're addressing the linen outfit problem again. So I set them to constantly be making sledges. Here's where the use of linen is going to start becoming a little bit of an issue because we start building bows and fishing tools and clothing out of the linen. So it'll stop being such an abundant resource, but luckily it's never usually a problem. But now we'll have them producing sledges for us so we don't have to keep marking them out. And when we lose them, we won't, it'll actually balance out how they're made too, so you won't lose 5 of them at once. It'll just be one at a time. Not really sure what I was looking at this particular moment here. I think we were addressing the wall yet again. We wanted to increase our population because our food sources are doing fine now, but we definitely need more people because our workload has just consistently been way too high. You just don't want it to be up around 200 because then people are just very, very inefficient. I had a game once where my town got attacked by raiders and they just did not get to the defenses in time, and so the raiders ended up killing so many of them that our workload went up to 800%. That's the most I've ever seen it. That game didn't last very long. I think that was when I was playing one of the more challenging scenarios, though, because if you play not the Northlands, but I can't remember the other one. There's another challenging scenario. You start off with just a small town, and you start off in the middle of the Neolithic. So you already have some farming, you already have some better buildings and whatnot, but you also already start off with raiders, and they're way more, they're stronger, their parties are bigger, and they're way more frequent. So you really have to defend yourself, and I learned with that one that I had to, I probably had to restart that scenario 5 or 6 times because I realized that the first priority should be building a wall around your town so that you have something to defend you at least. Yeah, I think I placed down a couple of houses here because I wanted to spark a little bit of population growth, which I should have addressed the linen clothing problem first, but hindsight is 2020. But as you can see, our linen production right now is pretty good. We do have a surplus, so it looks like our production of everything at this point in the game was decent. At the very least, we had, at least a handful of all of the resources that we could at this point in time. Oh, well, I was not paying attention. It looks like that is the end of the episode. So thank you guys for joining yet again. I look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Unfortunately, the next one and the one after that will both be voiceovers as well. But I appreciate your guys' patience and staying along with me for this ride because we still have a good handful more of episodes to go after that as well. So thank you so much for joining yet again. Look forward to seeing you guys in the next one. Bye-bye.